Okay, hi everyone. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. We wrapped up the opening of the Eyes Go shows, and somewhere around the 2/3 mark of the Go show, I jumped over to the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra Go show, and I had a lot of questions at the time on my various sites about Daimoku. So I went ahead and started that. I think we did parts 1, 2, and 3, but we didn't finish the Go show. So now that opening of the eyes is done, and we did on the Treasure Tower, let's go on and do the next one. And I'll start from where I left off. So if it sounds like I'm starting in the middle, you'll know to go look for parts 1, 2, and 3 to catch you up. This will be part 4. So here we go. By the way, I'm recording this on new equipment. I'm trying something new. I know it looks like I still have some trouble getting the lighting right. But I will fix it over time. And if you have any comments, of course, I'm always glad to hear your suggestions and comments. More about Buddhism than about my silly equipment. As long I don't think you need to see my beautiful visage that well. And a note on that, you may have noticed in the last few videos, I've gone ahead and let my facial hair grow, and actually all my hair. I don't have much on my head. I'm deeply respectful of ancient Buddhist tradition that's still with us today, shaving the complete head as a signifier of non-attachment to normative dress codes and that kind of thing. Just another departure from the ego, the egotistical attachment to aesthetic and those kind of things. But I've also studied with a lot of Indian scholars who have a different view. And I'm starting to lean toward the view that shaving the head and face every day as a Buddhist is a sort of an attachment to an aesthetic that's attached to non-attachment. Does that make sense? I don't know that I said that well. But the same way I resisted groups that I've been a part of in the distant past that insisted you wear a suit and tie just to go to the community center and go Hanzen and chant to go Hanzen as somehow a symbol of respect. Gohanzen doesn't have all of those foibles. Those are attachments. Those are ego. Those are fitting some sort of arbitrary fake rules. We're about celebrating life and in its entirety and the preciousness of it. And if my body grows hair, then it grows hair. If I have aesthetic preferences, well, I may. As a human being, we all do. But as a representation of me being a Buddhist, it's kind of at odds, I think, with the actual teaching. In other words, shaving and the appearance of shaving is an egotistical attachment, and at least in this day, in Mappo. So I'm going to shave it where it makes me uncomfortable, and I may from time to time shave my entire head again. But it'll simply be because it makes me feel comfortable, and there's no disrespect to you. I'm honoring you completely. If you feel differently, let me know, and I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of my freedoms, if you will, to enough of a political faction. But I really don't think so. I think we're all just really trying to know ourselves better, and the only thing we should be concerned about is anything that gets in the way of that. So that's what I mean in response to comments. If it really bothers you that it affects the way you hear my lectures, then I want to know about that, because that's something I am sensitive to, and I do everything that I do possibly to give you the best, truest form of Buddhism and honesty and straightforward language. No hidden agendas here, okay? So anyway, thought I'd speak to that because it's starting to look pretty substantial, and we'll see how long that lasts. No rule, except to be kind to one another. That's a good rule. All right, so we'll continue from where I ended in part 3 with, because it can cure what is thought to be incurable, it is called myo, or wonderful. So, next paragraph. In general, there are 4 kinds of people who have great difficulty in attaining Buddhahood or rebirth in the Pure Land. And as you'll recall, we discussed rebirth as a moment-to-moment affair. Anyway, you can see that in part 3. I won't go into it here. But it's not an actual place. The Pure Land is a mental exercise. The way your worldview is your Buddha land. And it's that worldview is filled with your screens, your veils of misunderstanding and attachments and so on and so forth. And so what we're all trying to do with our Buddhist practice is crumble down those veils, rip them down, any brick walls in there we want to knock down. We want to see clearly what the world is that we should view, because that is the foundational truth of our human minds, only as seen through our Buddha mind, our clear lens, right? So, first are those predestined for the 2 vehicles. 28, oops, that's a reference, sorry. I gotta fix that in this book. Second are Ichantikas. Third are those who cling to the doctrine of void, emptiness. And fourth are those who slander the law. But through the Lotus Sutra, all of these people are able to become Buddhas. That is why the Lotus Sutra is called Myo. Now he'll start to break these down so that you understand. The 2 vehicles are of learning and realization. Those are students who fall in love, in other words, with the process of learning instead of learning the meaning of what they're learning. Does that make sense? The second are Ichantikas. Those are people who you can't convince them. They don't see anything. They don't understand fully. You can't. Those very same people, the people of the 2 vehicles, some of them, not all of them, some of them believe they've got the answer and you can't feed them any more information. They don't want to read. They don't want to learn. So I know how to do this, and they don't accept the Lotus Sutra for its position and its meaning. Again, it's about not fully investigating the meaning of the ultimate teaching of the Lotus Sutra, which stands on all the other sutras. It doesn't stand alone as the teaching. It stands as the culmination of the teachings. Big difference. A lot of groups don't get that. Third are those who cling to the doctrine of the void. Most people would say, aha, that's Zen. You're not wrong. But there's a lot of documentation, and Nagarjuna talked about this a lot, correcting the impression of an emptiness, that an emptiness is not empty. An emptiness is stripping away of our egotistical attachments, and what is left is clarity. That's different. And fourth are those who slander the law. So if you put down or ridicule Buddhist scripture, or you just think of it as some third world romantic thing, or anything like that, that just outright says, no, that's just this or that or the other, it's not what I'm going to do, then you're actually slandering the Lotus Sutra, and it's called slander, which I talked about a couple of videos ago in the opening of the eyes, because what you're really slandering is your own clarity, your own Buddha nature. Okay? So, Devadatta was the eldest son of King Dronodana and a nephew of King Suddhodana, the father of the Buddha Shakyamuni, which made him the Buddha's cousin. He was also the elder brother of the Buddha's disciple, the Venerable Ananda. He was thus by no means a person of low station in the southern continent Jambudvipa. He became a disciple of the monk Sudaya and entered the religious life. From the Venerable Ananda, he learned the 18 miraculous powers, and he committed to memory the 60,000 teachings of the non-Buddhist schools and the 8,000 teachings of Buddhism. He observed the 5 ascetic practices and appeared almost more saintly than the Buddha himself. Thinking to make himself a leader like the Buddha, he dared to commit the crime of disrupting the Buddhist order by establishing his own ordination platform on Mount Gayashri Shirsha and inviting the Buddha's disciples over to his side. He confided to Crown Prince Ajatasattu, quote, "I intend to kill the Buddha and become the new Buddha. You must kill your father, the king Bimbisara, and become the new king in his place," end quote. After Crown Prince, now see, that would be slander of the Lotus Sutra, wouldn't it, at its source. After Crown Prince Ajatasattu had in fact killed his father, Devadatta kept watch on the Buddha's activities and with a large stone caused his blood to flow. He also struck and killed the nun Utpalavarna, who had reached the state of Arhat. Thus he committed fully 3 of the 5 cardinal sins. In addition, with the Venerable Kokalika as his disciple and King Ajatasattu as his patron, Devadatta began to attract followers from everywhere, until throughout the 5 regions of India, with its 16 great states, 500 middle-sized states, and 10,000 small states, every heart guilty of 1, 2, or 3 of the cardinal sins was a member of his group. They gathered around him as the various rivers gather in the great ocean, or as plants and trees gather on a great mountain. As the wise gathered around Shariputra, and those with transcendental powers flocked to Madhayana, so did evil persons throw in their lot with Devadatta. So just from that alone, you can see that in the Buddha's time, in Shakyamuni Buddha's day, there were a lot of rival factions because they viewed all of this as political. You know, religious orders throughout the West and East have always been a way of commanding control of the populace, and that's all ego. So, and it creates competition. People use the teachings to control wealth, control populace, control favoritism, so on and so forth, rather than establishing a deep meaning for what the teachings are about. They just use them, and the more profound the teachings, the easier it is to capture people, unless they're practicing correctly, but it takes a while, right, to get there. So as a result, the great earth, which is 168,000 yohanas thick and rests on a windy circle as hard as a diamond, nevertheless split open, plunging Devadatta alive into the great citadel of the hell of incessant suffering. His leading disciple, Kokalika, also fell into hell alive, as did the Brahman's daughter, Chincha, King Virudaka, and the monk Sunakashatra. I apologize. Moreover, the people of India, with its 5 religions and 16 great states, 500 middle-sized states, I believe. Yep. And 10,000 small states all observed this. Those in the 6 heavens, 6 heavens of the world of desire, and in the 4 meditation heavens, all beings in both the worlds of form and formlessness, including Brahma, Shakra, the devil king of the 6th heaven, and King Yama, likewise witness their fate. I've gone all over these names, most of them, in previous videos, so I hope you'll let me grace me with some latitude here to just keep on reading to get the meaning out of this. I will say, though, at this point, and remind you again that these aren't actual people and exercises. They are states of mind. This is a mental exercise, right? So all the beings throughout the major world systems and the worlds of the 10 directions heard about this and unanimously concluded that even though as many kalpas should pass as there are dust particles of the land, Devadatta and the others would never escape from the great citadel of the hell of incessant suffering, and that though the stone that marks the duration of a kalpa might be worn completely away, they would continue to suffer in the Avicii hell. How astounding, then, that in the Devadatta chapter of the Lotus Sutra, Shakyamuni Buddha should reveal that Devadatta was his teacher in the past existence and should predict that he would attain enlightenment in the future as a thus come one heavenly king. If the sutras preached before the Lotus Sutra are true, then the Lotus Sutra must be an outrageous lie. But if the Lotus Sutra is true, then the previous sutras must be guilty of perpetrating the wildest deceptions. If Devadatta, who committed 3 of the 5 cardinal sins and in addition was guilty of countless other grave offenses, could become the thus come one heavenly king, then there can be no doubt that the other evildoers who committed only 1 or 2 of the cardinal sins will surely attain the way as well. For if the great earth itself could be overturned, then the plants and trees on it would, as a matter of course, be overturned. And if one can crush the hardest stone, one can certainly bend the pliant grasses. Therefore, the Lotus Sutra is called Myo. Now, a lot of people that interpret that to mean Myo is mystical. And I have often had issues with Western words like mystical. We see a lot of mysticism everywhere. Humankind, since we evolved from apes, have been mystified. Anything we don't understand is mystical. That's what this really means. It doesn't mean mystical as in magic and non-penetrable or filled of secret powers or anything you generally associate with mystical. It's used here, and he didn't even say mystical, he just said Myo. Myo is, and I'll refer to other videos here on the origins of life and the 3,000 realms in a single moment. That when I discuss it, I talk about quiescent energy and how the foment, the pre-beginning, if you will. People ask what existed before the universe, and I go into great detail into all that. But if you can picture in your mind a place where nothing is manifest, but everything is potential. Simply potential. View that as kind of a slow humming energy. That's an analogy. It's hard to talk about, but the understanding comes with time. That potential, the path toward formations of anything, formations of energy, formations of plants, formations of atoms, formations of DNA, formations of you and I. They all start at this very, very, very quiet, very slightly unstable, if you will, quiescent energy. And so Myo is, in one term, talking about that quiescent energy, the 12-link causal chain, or Nidana, which you might read about independently, which is in words an attempt by the Buddha to describe how quiescent energy manifests into thingness or suchness, and the manifestation of that in samsara, that entire breadth of activity, is myo. So you see how difficult that is to perceive and even to visualize. So it's understandable that in the West we would use the word mystical to describe it, but don't let that fool you. There's no magic in it in any sort. It's an actual identifiable process. And science keeps getting closer and closer to it, along with neurobiology and other sciences. They're getting closer and closer. Particle physics, quantum research. They're all getting to that point. And it's really, it floors me that Shakyamuni Buddha saw this clearly almost 3,000 years ago. And we're just now, we don't even have the equipment to be able to measure it in science. But we know we were heading there. Anyway, I'll let you do your own research on that. So this is Myo. Coming now to the subject of women, we find that they... Now, why is he saying Myo here? Let me... I want to make this clear, because this is very important. I said it's a mental exercise he's talking about, these people who are working against Shakyamuni Buddha, because Shakyamuni Buddha is teaching us all how to liberate ourselves from our egotistical attachments in this condition called samsara. He's not saying samsara is evil. In fact, he's lauding samsara because it's only as human beings that we can discover our Buddha mind and have this amazing, overwhelming awakening about the process of life, all of life, right? From a rock to you and me, from Pluto, from Alpha Centauri, from the beginning of this universe to the end of it, and our hair color. I'm intentionally being a little ridiculous there, but I'm very honest with you. This is what Buddha mind perceives the true nature of all of it. It perceives the Myo. And so when he talks about these stories of people committing these evil acts, if you will, because I don't like the word sin, but it's a nice little catch-all to say, look, they're working against their own enlightenment. This is a slander. This is a slander of their Myoho Renge Kyo. It's a slander of their entire process of being, Myoho Renge Kyo. It's often been said, Myo being that largesse of understanding of formations and instantiations of suchness, Ho is the actual manifestation of the Myo, Myo-ho, Myo potential formations and attachments into this samsaric condition, ego, attachment, so on, attachments largely built in this life, but that brought us to life. This is Ichinen Sanzen. Ichinen is what we do in this life, a lot like our, I don't want to say will, because will is kind of how we interpret things in our minds. Ichinen is more about the kinetic energy of our Myo, kind of pushing itself forward over and over again in each moment into this reality that we're constantly justifying, unjustifying, molding, if you will. And Nichiren Sanzen is every moment that same process occurred before consciousness, or it depends, that's another wildly argumentative thing that we can get into, but it's something to discuss. It's a topic for discussion, because you could argue that from the very moment those first energies started to coalesce toward something, that this was a consciousness of sorts. And I talk about that in my 3,000 Realms lecture on the origins of life. So, coming now to the subject of women, we find that they are strongly condemned in both the Buddhist and non-Buddhist writings. The works known as the Three Records of the Five Canons and the Three Sovereigns and the Five Emperors of Ancient China depict them as fawning and crooked. I have no idea how long this video is so far, which is kind of freeing. What does that say? Oh, we got time. For this reason, disaster is said to have come about because of the three women of antiquity. Thus, women are identified as the cause of the downfall of a nation and its people. We see this in Western writings too, right? A lot of our favorite demons, all of our demons, like what's the gal with all the snakes for hair in the Greek mythologies. But the female is chthonic. There's a good word for you to look up. CHTHONIC. 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 I hope I spelled that right. What's that gal? Camille Paglia talks about it in her tome, her big book from, she goes over the male and female aspects of humanity. Great book. China depicts them as flying and crooked, blah, 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 downfall. The Flower Garland Sutra, or Kigan Sutra, if you're studying from Japanese, the first great teaching that the Buddha preached following his enlightenment, states, quote, women are the messengers of hell who can destroy the seeds of Buddhahood. They may look like bodhisattvas, but at heart they are like yaksha demons, end quote. The Nirvana Sutra, the Buddha's last teaching that he delivered in the grove of sal trees, says, quote, all rivers and streams are invariably windy and devious, and all women are invariably fawning and crooked. So, same words, end quote. It also says that, quote, if all the desires and delusions of all the men throughout the major world systems were lumped together, they would be no greater than a karmic impediment of one single woman, end quote. So it's interesting now, he's implicating men in this. And what he's really saying, if you're paying attention, is that although he's blaming the women for all of this deviousness, how can you be an evil influence without something to influence? Think about that. If the women are such an evil influence, then it is men who choose to accept their influence who are in trouble. So in early Buddhism, there was a lot of privation on even looking at a female. This is why monasteries were invented, right, for Buddhists. They had to study in seclusion. They weren't even allowed outside the walls. The very founding of the Buddhist curiosity, the curiosity, I should say, pre-Buddhist, of Siddhartha Gautama, was to leave the palace where he was treated with opulence and go look around the irregular world, and that's where he asked himself those fundamental questions about birth, sickness, old age, and death, right? He was surrounded by the end result of human desire, and he wanted an answer to that. So here he is, he's talking about the powerful influence of our species' two sexes. All we want to do is continue our species. So sex, the other, that's two different things, is extremely powerful as an influence in our lives, blinds us to almost everything. So that's really what he's talking about here. And even so, as we'll find out here, if you practice correctly with the Lotus Sutra, women also are Buddhas, can practice and open, discover, and reveal their Buddha mind. This was never available to them before the Lotus Sutra. So this is why Nichiren is making such a huge point of it. When the Flower Garland Sutra says that women can destroy the seeds of Buddhahood, it means that they scorch and burn the seeds that would otherwise allow them to become Buddhas. One way to understand that is that they scorch Buddhahood because men are the only ones in the early teachings who are said to be able to become Buddhas. or achieve their Buddhahood. And if they're derailed by their love interests or their sexual interests with women or other men or whatever, then that overwhelms their commitment to practice, their resolve, their determination to reveal their Buddha mind, their Buddha nature, their Buddhahood. So that's how they scorch the seeds of Buddhahood, which is in all of us. When clouds mass, in a way, if you're into LGBTQ and so on, so forth, this argument could easily be flipped around. It could be between two men, two women, it could be between transgender, whatever. The point is that our strongest desires are food, shelter, and sex, right? And oftentimes, especially for a great majority of our life, sex is the most powerful. If we had an opportunity to have sex over eating a meal, we'd have to be really desperately hungry to not go for the sex first, right? So this is why there's so many privations about sex. We're in a modern era now. We have so many influences that sex is not at the top of the list anymore. It's certainly there. Don't get me wrong. But here's a very clear statement about influences in general. When clouds mass in the sky in a time of great drought and heavy rain falls to the earth, the countless withered plants and trees everywhere will put forth blossoms and bear fruit. But this is not true of seeds that have been scorched. They will never sprout. Rather, the heavy rain makes them rot. So the implication there is that if you service all your needs and pleasures in life, even if you practice Buddhism, you're not committed to it. Your resolve is weak. And because you're detracted by it constantly, slandering the law, and doing these appeasements of flesh, you're destroying your own evolution to your Buddhahood, your Buddha mind. That doesn't say don't have sex. Understand. This is about getting derailed in your practice for it. Now the Buddha is like the masses of clouds. His teachings are like the heavy rain, and the withered plants and trees are like all living beings. When they are watered by the rain of the Buddha's teachings and observe the 5 precepts, the 10 good precepts, and the meditative practices, all of which bring merit, they will put forth blossoms and bear fruit. The scorched seeds that never sprout, even though the rain falls on them, but instead rot, are comparable to women who, though they encounter the Buddhist teachings, cannot free themselves from the suffering of birth and death, but instead turn away from the truth of Buddhism and fall into evil paths. This is what the sutra means when it says that women can destroy the seeds of Buddhahood. Because, and this is another very important aspect of this, the seeds of Buddhism that they're scorching are their own. Do you see? This is the analogy to slander, as I was saying earlier. And need I say that we all have male and female aspects in each one of us. So there's a woman in you, and there's a man in you, and there's both in you. So when you wrestle with yourself and you allow your lesser self to influence you and go do something instead of going to Gohanzen and chanting, you can get very, very clever at that in your mind. You know it. This is the passion play you're going through. Does that make sense? All right, we'll go a little further, and then I'll call it quits on this video, and we'll see what you think of the audio quality. I know I need to work on the lighting. That's just not good. But hopefully you'll get something from this lesson, this little lecture of mine, and please, please, please ask questions. The passage in the Nirvana Sutra cited above says that just like all the rivers and streams twist and wind, so too are women perverse and devious. Because water is a pliant substance, When its path is blocked by some hard object, such as a rock or a mountain, it will split into two streams or turn aside, flowing now this way, now that. You understand the analogy by now, right? This is our own minds. When we are falsely attracted or run into obstacles, I'm tired, I don't feel like it. Who is that saying that? Convincing you of that, influencing you of that. Maybe it's your aches and pains in your body. I can't tell you how many times in my life, it's been a long time since I've done that, but it has happened. I've literally dragged myself into my Butsudan room to chant to Gohanzan. Women are the same. Their minds are soft and weak, and like I said, we all have that in us. Though they may believe that a certain course is right, if they come up against the strong will of a man and find their way blocked, then they will turn in some directions quite different from the one they originally intended. Do you see how he flipped that around just now? He's talking about the women being influenced by a strong man. Oh, suddenly the man's not the victim, the woman is. But she's a victim of her own making. That's true for us too, guys. Again, though you may trace pictures on the surface of the water, nothing of what you have drawn will remain. Women are the same. For lack of steadfastness, I said resolve, is their basic character. Hence, they will think a certain way at one moment, and then a moment later will have quite a different view. And a lot of you guys just pumped your fist in the air and said, yeah, right? But we do it too, guys. But the basic character of a Buddha is honesty and straightforwardness. Hence, women, with their devious ways, can never become Buddhas. Now, this is pre-Lotus Sutra. Keep in mind where we are now. Women are doomed to the 5 obstacles and the 3 types of obedience. Hence, the silver-colored woman's sutra says that even if the eyes of the Buddhas of the 3 existences were to fall to the ground, no woman could ever attain Buddhahood. I'm not sure how that works, but as a literal translation. But again, we're talking about steadfastness, resolve. Great perfection of wisdom, one of my favorite sets of sutras, says that one could sooner catch the wind than grasp the mind of a woman. And this is the wandering mind, right? We may say that this is a trait of women, but it may be a more prevalent in many women, but it's also very much at play in men. And we live in a time today, in the latter day of the law, where you could just say people. All of us. Yet, and remember, this is to an audience of samurai. You could not meet a more macho group. And if you're Latino and I misused that word, I apologize. What I mean to say is that this is a very, very, very misogynist, male-centered society. Women are property, right? So this is who he's talking to. So it's pretty adventurous speech. So keep that in mind, too. Yet, though all female beings were so despised in the various sutras, when Bodhisattva Manjushri spoke the single character Myo, a woman was instantly able to become a Buddha. So extraordinary was this occurrence that Bodhisattva wisdom accumulated, the foremost disciple of the Buddha, many treasures, in the world of the treasure purity, and the venerable Shariputra, who was known among the Daskam-1 Shakyamuni's disciples as the foremost in wisdom, protested. Wait. A woman became a Buddha because you uttered Myo? They said that, according to all the Mahayana and Hinayana sutras that the Buddha had preached in the previous 40 years and more, the Dragon King's daughter could not possibly become a Buddha. And yet, in the end, their arguments were of no avail, and in fact, she did become a Buddha, right there before their eyes. And if you read this passage that they're referencing in the Lotus Sutra, you'll find that I'm not sure how the original is written, but the translation says that in that instant, the Dragon King's daughter instantly went from being a woman to being a man and becoming a Buddha. 1, 2, 3. You had to go through the male thing just to make it more plausible to everyone. But again, that's not literal. That's God, I don't know if I should say this, but this is not a transgender thing. Okay, this is a mental passage. Thus, the passage in the Buddha's first sutra, declaring that woman, quote, can destroy the seeds of Buddhahood, end quote, and that in his final sermon in the Sal Grove about how, quote, all rivers and streams are invariably winding and devious, end quote, were utterly contradicted, and the views reflected in the silver-colored woman sutra and the great perfection of wisdom were proven to be nonsense. Wisdom accumulated, and Shariputra were obliged to still their tongues and shut their mouths, while all the human and heavenly beings present at the great gathering where the Lotus Sutra was preached pressed their palms together in an excess of joy. All this was due entirely to the virtue of the single character Myo. And remember, this is a Gosho about the Daimoku. So he's really impressing upon you that these aren't just magical words, that these are containers of all these concepts. And I've said this in many ways over the years. I've heard people call these magic words, and they simply are not magic words. They are words that are invoked. Once you understand the breadth of these teachings and what are contained within the thought, Myo, then you'll understand that it's not magical. It's an invocation of a reference that you know. So without study, I'll say it again, without study, it becomes a magic word because you don't know what it means. It's only through study that you'll get that. In this southern continent of Jambudvipa, there are 2,500 rivers, and every single one of them is winding. They are devious like the minds of the women of Jambudvipa, and yet there is one river called the Sahaya that follows a course as straight as a taut rope, flowing directly into the Western Sea. A woman who has resolute mind of determination in the Lotus Sutra will be like this river, proceeding directly to the Pure Land in the West. Such is the virtue inherent in the single character Myo. Myo means to revive, that is, to return to life. And I think I'm going to stop there, give you guys a break. And we'll go into another way of interpreting the character Myo. It's pretty meaty stuff. That's why it bears rereading. You'll always learn something, no matter how many times you reread it, because your mind continues to evolve. And when you dream at night, your mind starts to shuffle these things around and get rid of stuff it doesn't think it needs and put other stuff in order. And the more morning you'll get up with some aha moments and some frowned brow moments, and you'll want to either study or you want to take a breather and just chant about it. This is the nature of your evolution toward your Buddha nature, your Buddha mind. And I wish you all the success in that. Thank you for participating, for being here. If it's possible and you can support me so I can keep improving these videos and bringing more information to you, please go to threefoldlotus.com and click one of the donate links, or go directly to PayPal at paypal.com/TLK. There'll be more info on that at the end of this video. And take care of yourself, stay healthy, and Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thanks.